All right, so um, I'm coming to you live from Penticton, British Columbia, Canada. Um, and just sitting here, thinking about a few things. Had some thoughts on Facebook with the little project I'm working on, Bare Bones Media. So I thought I'd try to reiterate some of the same things I was talking about just um, 10 minutes ago and see where we come, see where we get. So, freedom is something that's pretty important to me. Um, Most people would say that it's important to them, but when you really look at it, uh, the opposite conclusion would be true. Um, I'm a Canadian, right? So I live in a free country that allows me to speak freely, and it's obvious that in other countries that's not the case. If I was to denounce a government or the military or whatever it is, whatever organization that's in charge, there's a good possibility in some of those countries I would be executed or made an example of somehow. So right at the outset, I want to acknowledge that Canada is obviously one of the most free countries, but uh, having said that, it's not that we can rest on our laurels and think everything's all well and good when everything's obviously not. And the illusion of freedom is glaringly right in front of us. We've accepted the illusion of something for something else that we should all have. Now, how can that be? All right. Well, let's explore the question of whether or not we are free. And please, at any time, if you have comments or questions, that's what the section is there for. I'm just one guy with a certain amount of information. Um, Obviously, does not have a firm grasp on all the facts, but no one does. There's not one person alive that has all the facts at the ready. So I don't think that should stop us from voicing our opinions and speaking plainly to the the, the problem that's right in front of us. And that problem is that we've bought a system, we've bought into a way of thinking that tells us that we're free to make choices, but the choices that we're making are so limited that it's not. It comes down to not really even have a choice. Like, let's say the elections. If you're in the United States, you have essentially two parties. One's Republican, one's liberal, Democrats, and you have to make a choice between to entities, to political platforms, to ideologies that, in the long run, love the fight and need the fight to exist. And these people in power continue that fight, continue to use any propaganda at their disposal, using the media to dictate what we think of, what's important, and essentially, especially in the United States, it makes us believe that military and force and occupations of other countries and the quest for oil and wealth and capitalism and greed and pride, all these things are good and should be aspired to. And this way of thinking only leads, and has only led in history, to the destruction of civilization. So that's a fact. Greed has never served any organization, anybody, anything very well. If there's such a chasm between the rich and the poor, the people with influence and people that don't have influence, and when civilization has become this, and it's right in front of us, the powerlessness of the individual, which is pretty much all of us, with the exception of a few people, the elites at the top. When the mass populace doesn't have a say and has resigned itself to be conformist and operate much like a sheep would under the protection of the shepherd, it's a problem, right? So these are the things that it seems like it would be important to talk about these things, to dissect them, to understand them. Is it truth? Do we live under this? It seems to me like a slavery of some kind. Like the truth of that statement, is that true? And is that important if it's true? And is it important if it's not true? Right? Because if it's not true, then there's no reason to continue the dialogue, right? These things have been around ever since I was young. It's the way government is run, the way advertising is thrown at us, how malleable the human mind is to conform to anybody's idea, as long as it sounds relatively logical. It's obvious that there's a machine out there, propaganda, that are being used against people who are ignorant of the fact that it's being used. There's a number of reasons for this. And I think we should talk about all of them eventually, but let's kind of establish whether or not initially whether or not we do believe that we're free or not. Now, there's a difference between being free inwardly and freedom outwardly. And without getting into the inward freedom, we got to start somewhere. So let's talk about that outward freedom that we really should all have if we want to live in an optimal setting. So let's look at it from the perspective of, let's make a general statement and say we're slaves. We're slaves to the government. Well, how are we slaves to this organization? It's obvious that we can think for ourselves. We have a will of our own. But the question is, have we given the ability to choose, have we given that away because we think that other organizations, other people that are smarter than us, that have more education than us, that have had more experience in politics or military, do we give these leaders, these people, and there's only really, a few of them, a handful, like not a handful, not 5 of them, but a very small group of people that are continually trying to tell the world's populace that whatever they say should go because they have the answers. They are the only ones that can make the decisions. They are the only ones gifted with the ability to think along those lines, and anybody else who doesn't have the right words or doesn't understand Latin or understand another language or isn't competent in science or the nomenclature that is being thrown around and disguising as like true knowledge. There's a huge difference between memorizing something, memorizing lists, memorizing the periodic table or a certain mathematical equation. It doesn't give you it's not true intelligence. It's maybe a form of intelligence, but we're definitely missing out on some very key ingredients to allow for freedom to happen in any society. So, free or slave? It's a question, but it's like it's also a statement, to some degree we are free, right? We can see the freedoms that we have in Canada. I can see the freedoms that I have also to maybe disconnect in some way, but it comes at a price. Sure, I have the freedom to disconnect from the let's say the governmental system that is in place that is completely rigged and only serves the interests of rich people who don't get taxed. Government takes from the poor, gives right back to the rich, the banks, the governments, the businesses, the ones, the oil companies, the pharmaceutical companies. they're all in on it, right? Now, there's some of us that have bought into this and think, everything's fine. It's always been that way. It will always be that way. So either that's just a kind of like that's just a statement. That's a statement and a non-belief that things could get better. And I'm not going to hinge everything on a belief. And history has dictated or shown that things don't get better. And in fact, today there's a huge argument that it's worse. There are those that would say that, hey, man, things are so much better now. Like, look what you got. You got you got computer, you got TVs, you got, all sorts of gadgets. You can own a couple of cars, have a nice house, and the list goes on. So things are obviously better, right? Well, it depends what you it depends what you diagnose as something that's better or something that's more optimal than another, or something that matters or really means something. Like, does stuff, more things, mean anything really in the long run, seeing that we come into this world with nothing and then we leave with nothing? Is it really important to acquire so much over a lifetime and compile it, and then use that to assert dominance over another group of people or another country? Does it make sense for us to be in really any war? And specifically being the one who initiates war, carrying out assassinations, carrying out political agendas, like what is it called when you put restrictions on another country? The word's not coming to me, and sometimes the words don't, and that's fine. But you can impose certain restrictions on countries and carry out your agenda that way. But again, you're using your influence, your power to control people. Now, is that working? Has it ever worked? No, it has not worked. It works only to the advantage of those that have already. That's a fact. So where does that leave us? So I'm just going under the assumption that we've already agreed, and possibly we haven't, and that's why the comment section is there. That's why I'm not going to see your comments. I just don't see anything right now. But I will reply to anybody's comments or question even my authority or knowledge to have any say. That's worth talking about. In fact, the people that do have the PhDs and the degrees and the specific knowledge on a specific topic, I would say that in a large part they're missing the point, because they're so highly specialized in one discipline that they can't see other disciplines. They don't see how everything works together. It's a complicated system that we've created for ourselves. And if you're just a specialist in one area, you only see one way of thinking, or maybe two, when there could be 10, 20, 100 ways of thinking about a certain topic, based on the fact that there are other ways to think of it. Let's just say, like, maybe you're a politician, and what your job is to maintain the power, maintain your position. It seems right now, it doesn't seem like politicians most are really into it for making change or creating an environment that is good for everybody. It's something different, anyways. If you're a politician, you don't see things as a scientist would. So, or you don't see things as, if we're talking about environmental issues like climate change, it's so easy to say, well, there's no climate change, or there is climate change, and have no real backing, no real knowledge, marrying all the disciplines together. Now, if you have a well-rounded knowledge base, I think, which I believe that a lot of people do, but they're frightened to join in on the conversation because either they're going to look stupid because they don't have the words to explain, or they don't have all the facts that a specialist might. But I do think it's very, very important for all of us to, if we're inclined to do so, or if there's something in us that wants or needs to express these things, I think we should, regardless of your ability to speak a certain language or to be proficient in a certain area. I don't think I firmly believe that the specialists have kind of dropped the ball in that they're not thinking inclusively. So here we are, free or slave. Now, it doesn't really too much matter what I think, because I'm really only one person. I would never imagine anybody or want anybody to blindly accept what I'm saying. But, if I could, make one small little suggestion, look around you, look at yourself, look at the things that are important to you. And is it contrary to that center where compassion lies, where love lies, where kindness and gentleness and patience and things like that? Are we going against our true nature? Some would say that our true nature is to be violent, and I couldn't disagree more with a statement like that, just because history has shown us that we have been violent, and to such a degree that we take out huge populations of people, and this just doesn't happen, or just didn't happen with the Nazis in Germany and the Jewish population. It's happened in all sorts of countries like Indonesia and South America, and I know South America is a continent, but in Africa, also a continent. But it happens everywhere. Genocide happens everywhere. Now, is that our true nature? And is apathy our true nature, to not care, to kind of brush it under the rug, and live our lives in Canada? Canada being one of the most free countries in the world. Well, yeah, okay, well, that's probably true, but in an instant that can change, because we have right beside us, right down this way, south of us here, from Penticton, 40 minutes away is the U.S. border, and the U.S. likes to have a monopoly on everything. And when I say the United States or the U.S., I mean the people that are in office. It's their mandate to control our resources, to dominate. And we've seen it time and time again where they occupy countries and they create war to solidify this position, to ensure that they control oil reserves, where they control all sorts of different kind of mining. Basically, they want to control the resources that the earth has. For God's sake, they want they want to currently control the control space. You know, they're actively searching out ways where they'll have dominance in space, and like they plant their flags on the moon. So why wouldn't they plant their flag right here in Canada? Now, Canada is in a unique position, I believe, because I don't think anybody around the world would allow that to happen. But you know, some strange things are happening on the planet today, and in the United States. It's clear. It's so clear that um, that the the people that are leading the country, whether it be in Congress or the White House or you know the Supreme Court, or there are agendas everywhere, and these people will stop at nothing to get what they want. They'll modify the truth. They'll use propaganda techniques with the news media that they own, with the movies that are produced that are so uncreative, the majority of them, and they just rehash pretty much the same storylines, the same plots. You gotta ask yourself, why is this happening? Why has the film industry become so lazy? Why has media become so lazy? Or is it not lazy? Maybe they're well aware of the fact that they're towing a party line of some kind. You know, they're either owned by the Republicans, or they're owned by the Democrats, or they're owned by a specific, you know, enterprise. So truth, to some of these people, it doesn't really matter. It's a paycheck, and the people who get paid the most are usually the ones that are, if not all the time, the ones that get paid considerable amounts of money to peddle this information. They wield it like a sword. You know, their end game is to manipulate and confuse people to the point where nobody knows what's going on, and they just give up. You know, why even try? Why even try to figure out politics? Why try to figure out why we're in this war, that war, you know, the Vietnam War? Why were we there? You know, that was. And don't ask me all the details about the Vietnam War. That was, you know, I was just born at that time, and again, you can't know everything about everything. But the fact is that we should never have been in that war. There's an argument that can be made that we should never be in war. War is not our natural state, right? But humanity, you know, let's deal with the facts. Humanity is violent for sure, which leads me to wholeheartedly believe that humanity is sick. And there's so many atrocities being perpetuated on a daily basis now, that we become so desensitized about it's not even on our radar. And again, it has to do with most likely the fact that we're so busy with our own lives, and we got to pay our taxes, and we gotta be constructive members of society. And I gotta go right now. Oh, but we'll end off here. I'm gonna just answer this door, and then we'll continue on later.